what's your take specifically kind of on, obviously caffeine, massive stimulant, the most widely used stimulant probably ever, right, throughout history. America runs on Dunkin' type crap, right? But then what's your take on that? And then like this more occurring kind of Zyn, right, pack of nicotine, right? They're all considered, I guess, nootropics, right? Boosters, kind of cognitive function enhancers, but nicotine could have been deemed terrible 10, 15 years ago. Obviously, it's in cigarettes, right? There's that whole thing, but like that's what people associate it with. What's your take on stimulants like this? Because I know I feel like I'm a little more sensitive to caffeine than a lot of people. Some people can take a nap or, Tyler used to abuse the hell out of caffeine, but he's cut his intake down because he's seen me cut my intake down.
Peer pressure.
Look right at the camera on that one. But what's your take on that, right? And why people might be different with that, and what is your take on nicotine, caffeine?
To start with caffeine, specifically, like you said, like it's been driving force. It's what really drove the Industrial Revolution. It's what kind of turned the page on, like putting your head down and getting to work. It locks you in. It's a nootropic. Yeah. It really does give you that internal like drive. And
that's funny, by the way. That I've heard talking to someone else years ago talking about enlightenment periods throughout history.
Yeah,
there was some sort of trace done, and I think it was on a Joe Rogan podcast that a guy brought this up that had studied certain paths of. He was like a historian. And like the coffee bean was introduced to certain areas, and shortly after, all those areas started to improve production, have some type of period of revolution or enlightenment or something like that, which is really interesting. And that's almost where like the coffee break comes from, where like bosses used to tell their workers to take a coffee break because they knew they'd come back a little bit fresher in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, it's something that's out there, and like coffee specifically like helps with GI. Like helps pass and starts your morning. Also kind of curbs some people's appetites, and like how you said before, how it affects you more than it affects Tyler. Like they tied it down to like gene specific. Like I was reading a study, I can't produce the exact gene, but they were saying people with one a little bit more sensitive than others. And like obviously everyone's gonna have a little bit difference, but like everyone knows that one person that can't even have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And then there's that one person like me, I could drink 2 cups of coffee and go to bed. And like
I used to love a little like espresso after dinner.
Yeah.
And now I just don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because it can't. Like, even though it may not affect you, like it probably is doing something.
Yeah, you're thinking about it, and it's like there.
It's true. Like it's definitely case specific. It depends. And then for like the nicotine stuff, nicotine is definitely another nootropic option, and it definitely increases alertness and attentiveness, but it is an addictive product and compound. Like there are pros and cons to everything you take, but nicotine was a part of cigarettes because it hooked you, that was the part that really got you to come back. And like you see it in like the Juuls and the vapes, and like they're terrible. The Juul and the vapes, and like the Zyns are another option where it's a little bit less damaging on your health, but it still has some sort of effect, and it's not perfect. It's not the greatest. It's not the worst. It's just another tool that people use.